Thank you for joining us. I am with Julia Salas, my good friend, and she's actually my niece. And today we're sitting down to tea and we're going to talk about how she got into Harvard and what she needed to do to get there. We're going to be asking her all sorts of questions. We're not just going to be talking about the nuts and bolts of how to get into a graduate program at Harvard. We're mostly going to focus on the mindset that it took for her to get in and the mindset that she is continuing to have and to sustain while she's there. So, welcome Julia. It's so good to see your face. So, she of course is just outside of Cambridge in Massachusetts. So, hi, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? We can get going if you want, or I can just go right into questions.
Yeah, I can introduce myself a little bit. I did my undergraduate degree in English literature with an art minor at Brigham Young University. Graduated, didn't know what I was going to do with my life after that. Um, but I was working in tailoring and I was listening to podcasts and kind of thinking more deeply about some things I wanted to figure out and some study I felt like I hadn't quite finished. And so during that time, I was kind of listening to podcasts and sewing and planning for my application to Harvard Divinity School. And that's kind of where it started. Um, the idea of going.
What made you think of Harvard Divinity School? You had a lot of headspace because you were doing alterations, right? She means tailoring, like actual tailoring. And so you had all this headspace. What made you think maybe I should try graduate school? And then, like, what kind of led you into the divinity program?
So I had a friend who, at BYU, I was president of the C.S. Lewis Society, and we used to read C.S. Lewis and have tea, actually,
I
every
love it.
week.
Like
There
the
was this really,
fellowship.
yes, there was this really cool girl there, Jacqueline, and I remember seeing that she had gone to Harvard Divinity School, and I'd never heard of it, and I thought, oh, I don't even know what they do there. But my capstone project, I was studying, um, memory, nostalgia, and trauma in contemporary American literature, and through some of my own experiences and some uh, experiences that I, kind of seen in my community. Latter Day Saint. I was interested in the religious dimensions of mental health and trauma, and so um, as I looked more into the program and what they actually offer and what I'd be able to do there, I suddenly thought, oh yeah, this isn't just like something cool to try to do, but something I feel like I need to do. Um, and so
Yeah.
right now I study, my program is technically, it's a Master's of Theological Studies with an emphasis on religion and the social sciences.
Wow. That paper that you had first talked about, what class was that in? Maybe you
So
already told me.
it was a capstone course at BYU, and it was memory, nostalgia, and trauma in
That's the name
contemporary.
of the class?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
in contemporary American literature, and I wrote about Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders, which is fantastic.
Right.
And just basically, it's this story about Abraham Lincoln. It's a fiction, but it's based on this idea that Lincoln lost his favorite son Willie right on the cusp of the Civil War, and like how he's coping with the grief. But so the
Right.
story has these fictional ghosts that are kind of stuck in this trauma state of limbo. And I kind of I read psychology journals on dissociation and I kind of mixed it together. So I had literary criticism, psych journals, and the text and kind of wove it together in this. And this was my sample for Harvard, actually,
Okay.
um, where I talked about how we can use literature as, extending empathy to victims of dissociation and trauma, and also the way that reading this metaphor of these characters are ghosts, but that's how some people actually feel when they're disembodied, feeling
Yeah.
disembodied with trauma and dissociation. This kind of works as like a really great metaphor for kind of humanizing that experience through literature. So
Yeah.
And that's what I always love the most about literature is like what it helps us understand about human nature and ourselves better in a way that's not, you don't get out a psychology journal, when you're reading on the beach. But if we can read literature and get this better window into each other and our natures and how we can help each other, I think that's the best thing literature does.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You can empathize with the characters, and yet there's because there's this screen of fiction between you, it somehow makes it more palatable and more, you can just digest it better. It's not preaching, and it's just, you're just able to absorb it and then relate to it on a way that nothing else can really teach you. Like literature has that power. Was that the paper that got published?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That was published at BYU's Literary Criticism Journal. That was my sample. But I knew I don't have a background in psychology. I didn't do psychology. I didn't do social work from undergrad. I did English and art. And now I'm trying to bridge into theology. And I had a very clear reason why, but I didn't know if that would translate.
Sure.
But what's interesting is, and I think far and away more and more, they really, in academia, they really value cross-disciplinary experience.
Yeah.
And they love that word too, cross-disciplinary anything. So if you think
Right.
you if you think you did your undergrad in the wrong thing and now you want to do a different master's program, they actually love that. That's usually it makes you a more dynamic candidate, and also in the classroom you have more experience and perspective to share. So most of my friends at school did something completely different in their undergrad. Most of them didn't do religious studies.
Yeah. Well, that's really wonderful and encouraging news to hear that, because I think more and more we're not cogs in a machine, right?
Mhm.
We should be multifaceted. And the more that you can make connections with other things, the more divergent thinking you can have, the more you can bring to the table, and the more you can bring to the research.
Mhm.
You really do need, I mean, especially with writing, you know, theses and dissertations, like they have to be new and a new idea. Like, and how else are you going to get that unless you have that, that hybrid vigor? Can we read that paper that you wrote? Like, if can we link that
Mhm.
that paper in the description?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, great.
You
We will
can
do
Google it
that.
even.
What's that?
I get an email every couple
Every
of
time
like
somebody
my
downloads it?
readership or just like how many people downloaded it that month. So
Wow, that's cool.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know if it's not that many, but you can Google it really easy. I'll send the link.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Too bad you don't get like a little like $1 per 1,000 clicks or something like that.
Yeah, it seems
That'd be
like
cool.
academia is begging for people to let you do things for free. So
Yeah.
at least at the start.
Yeah. Okay, so now did you mention, how did you hear about the Harvard Divinity School? And like hasn't it been a divinity school since the beginning? Like since the 1600s? Wasn't that sort of
Yeah, so it's kind of like every college starts as a theological seminary because that's the goal. That's the Puritans' plan for America.
right? Like all those early schools, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
What do we need education for? I mean, there wasn't this idea that you were gonna get a degree to have a vocation, right? That's what the trades were. So if you needed education and formal training, it was to become clergy. And so you see like Yale Divinity School pops up, Harvard Divinity School, but it doesn't become a divinity school until much later. But it just starts out as Harvard College. And
right.
that is where clergymen are trained, etc. And it's funny reading through the years about it, where they're like, it's straying farther and farther from God's purposes or whatever. I took a class in narratives of American religion, and at first they speak very highly of the Harvard College, and then as it goes on, they're like, it's no longer about God, and it's become, too academic or something. But that's how a lot of colleges start in America.
Sure.
In art, I
Yeah.
mean, arguably even in Europe, right? Oxford, Cambridge,
Oxford, I
Princeton.
think, was like that. Yeah. I
Hmm.
heard different. I heard a funny story about the origins at Cambridge where some kid was being accused of murder at Oxford. This is I
Um,
heard this at breakfast at a bed and
yeah.
breakfast in England from
Uh-huh.
some guy sitting near us. And he said that Cambridge started because it was a student at Oxford. He got himself into a pickle with a lady of the night. I think he murdered her or something. So
Yeah.
maybe not so much of a pickle. I think it was a crime of passion. He killed her. He's going to get expelled from Oxford and like probably maybe sent to jail or maybe not because he
Mhm.
came from high society. But then, so apparently his parents or something started Cambridge
Hmm.
instead. I mean,
Mhm.
but I've never heard that like corroborated. I've never heard of any other evidence supporting that, but it was a little story I heard. Okay. Okay, so you heard about I keep getting us off the rails, but it's okay. We'll
Oh
edit
yeah,
it. We'll edit extra
heard
stuff.
about it from my friend Jacqueline Dunn, and
And
then
she
there
had
was
already done the program.
she'd already done the program, but she did medieval studies, and I talked to her
Okay.
at one point, and I didn't have clarity on what I wanted to do there or what. Honestly, I was just kind of curious about it, and she did it more to study medieval.
Okay.
So she studied medieval texts, religious texts, etc. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. And after English, if you want to do a master's or PhD, you need like a very clear vision of American or British and what time period. And I was all over the place because I loved, the British Romantics. I took a class on um, British Romanticism, and then I was loving like Cormac McCarthy and this really gritty stuff, and reading Kurt Vonnegut and reading more about trauma and war and contemporary issues. And I I was really moved by a lot of those things that I was reading, even though I of course love the 19th century British because that's kind of everybody's favorite. But
Yeah.
um and I still do. I still do. But I was like, okay, what does this really look like? But yeah, with some of my own experiences with religious trauma and kind of I'd say almost like a spiritual kind of like a spiritual crisis or a spiritual was related to my mental health in really um, interesting ways. And I went to therapy, but it was, um, there were things my therapist just couldn't help me with. And there was things that my religion couldn't help me with. Um, and I had found that, therapy and psychology has become so secular. And that's kind of how it needs to be as a science, but it's kind of removed from this deeper experience of um, how religion constructs our spiritual realities. That's kind of what I talked about in my essay was, your reality, if you're a religious person, your belief in an afterlife, your belief in your role in mortality, etc. All of these things are related to your reality, your spiritual reality is what I've been calling it. And to ignore that is kind of to your detriment if you are having a mental health crisis or even just as like a source of meaning or hope to ground you with other kinds of crises. Like I just felt that spiritual had been overlooked um, in a big way in psychology, and that's what I was hoping to kind of weave together.
It sounds almost like you were kind of led to where you are, the program you're in, because it sounds like nothing else was really fitting, and then suddenly this one kind of opened up.
Yeah, so I was definitely fighting it for a while. I was thinking, oh, there's no way you can do that. It's going to be too hard. Or, I have chronic health issues. I thought, oh, I wouldn't even be able to handle it if I did get in. Um, and I just remember this very distinct day I was standing in my room and I just kept hearing like Harvard Divinity School, Harvard Divinity School. I'm like, I don't even know what they study there. I don't even, I
Yeah.
hadn't looked into it yet. And I told myself, I'm kind of at this dead end job that I don't like. I had gotten it in August and it was just very small. I worked with one other person in an extension room of a warehouse, just having pants all day basically. And I just graduated with my degree and I thought, what am I doing?
What
And I
year was
thought
this?
that would be, I graduated in April 2023.
Okay.
Yes. And then, so this would be August 2023. I spent a month applying for jobs. I only heard back from a Montessori daycare.
Big
Uh,
money there.
yeah, it's like, okay, and I also just didn't feel done. Like, I walked for my graduation, I sat down, and everyone was cheering around me and so excited and shaking my shoulders, and we did it, and I didn't feel complete. I didn't feel done. I didn't know
Interesting.
why.
Yeah.
Um, I really didn't feel done. I was like, so this is it. It's over. Something
Hmm.
was missing, not from my BYU experience necessarily, but just for me, something wasn't complete. So, um, I said,
Before you go on, I just want to
Mhm.
say that Julia, if anyone, like, there's lots of people who go through college and just sort of like get in and get out of there. But like, if there's anyone in the planet who really makes the most of their college experience, it's Julia. She was so great at like talking to professors, getting to know people, and like really digging into every subject. So she's like, um, Julia's really an exceptional student. And that shouldn't discourage anyone, but I do want to set the stage that Julia, like, she turned she turned BYU, which can be very much like a rush through kind of a college. She turned it into almost more of an Oxford experience where she was like talking to professors and getting their opinions, and they were, I don't know. It was, if I could do college again, I would do it like Julia. So, all right.
That is what they said in my interview. I was so worried. I had this long, spotty transcript of all these different things that I'd done because I did a lot of clothing construction. I took classes that I just wanted to because I wanted to learn, and that was one of the first things they said was, "You did a lot while you were there, and you did well." And I just thought they were gonna say, "Why didn't you finish in 4 years and get in and get out and get done?" But that's not how they saw it at all. So that is the one thing I really love about Harvard is they are not looking for the cookie cutter student body president, perfect GPA. That's not what they're looking for. Of course, you want to have some accomplishments, but they really care about how much you want to engage with the community, with not just other students, but the programs that are offered at the schools. Because if you know what programs they have and what you want to be a part of, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So they kind of saw that with my BYU transcript. I did a study abroad to England, Scotland, and Wales. I'd taken all these sewing classes that weren't part of a major or a minor or anything. It's just because they wanted to learn it, and they really liked that. So that was kind of a surprise to me.
Like Elle Woods being really good at,
History of polka dots.
yeah, that's great. So that was in 2023. Okay.
Hmm.
So, all right. So continue.
Oh, so August of 2023, I start this new job. And like I say, I'm listening to podcasts and about kind of some of the things that I've been struggling with and learning about just as far as religious trauma goes and things like that. But I was just kind of waking myself up to issues that were bigger than myself, things I had wondered about, but okay, this is actually something I feel really compelled by, but I don't know where to take this. And September, the application opens, and I say, what if I just make it my part time job at this job to work on my application? Because if I can sit through this job every day, go home, and work on my application, number one, I'll survive this job. And number two, one thing that I told myself was if you don't get in, all you did was spend months and months and months synthesizing some of your big goals, some of these big issues you want to talk about,
Yeah.
and making sense of your whole educational experience from 2013 to then, because it took me a decade because I dropped out for a while for health reasons. And then I worked part time to help pay for those health reasons till I finished. Um, And so I said, if I don't get in, this was still worth my time. This is still worth talking to my professors, refining, my essay. Well, it was published, so I could just submit that. But like refining my personal essay that I wrote. And I thought, if I do all this research and all this work and I don't get in, I still care about this research. I still care about
Right.
this topic. I still care about this issue. And that
Hmm.
wouldn't be a waste of time.
Sure. And it might lead to other things.
Exactly. So, and I also did something else, which was I started applying for a different job. And I interviewed with Salt Lake Community College, and they actually wanted me to teach a tailoring class there. But I interviewed with them, and then the next day I got my Harvard acceptance letter. So I
Wow.
didn't do it. But I really have this belief in like putting your energy into several things at once. It doesn't have to be a lot of things, but when you take the kind of like the panic and urgency out of something, I think it really can help you streamline and say, hey, I'm working on several avenues of what I might want to work out for myself. And if those things don't materialize, they're either not meant to be or I can try again next year. So I'd essentially come home from work. I worked 30 hours to have time to do this. So I'd work, come home, sit on my couch, and read and read and read about all the faculty at HDS, all the programs, read about the research I was interested in, and write and write and write. And I revised my personal essay. I don't even want to know how many times. Like, I
Wow.
would draft it, not like draft one, draft two, but I'd title it by the day so I knew when I had last edited it. And I would do it again. And I would do it again over and over. So I just made it my part-time job, and I thought I have 10 hours a week extra to dedicate to this, and I really did. Most days I worked on the application.
Wow. So what was the thing that was propelling you? Like explain that energy of like was it desire? Was it just interest? And I mean, it sounds like your mindset was in a perfectly good spot. Were you ever just like, "Oh, I don't want to do this?" Or was there some other energy that was kind of pulling you forward in that?
I think definitely both. I think a while ago during COVID actually, I had thought, wow, it'd be cool if I could do my masters on the East Coast and spend more time with my grandparents who I didn't get to know as well. And my mom was living out there at the time, and I didn't have direction. I didn't have a goal. I didn't have a reason, except I want to do grad school on the East Coast, which is not a good enough reason. It can be if you want it to be, but
It's a starting place, right?
yeah, because I couldn't see a through line from there to actually doing it. And so once I started listening to, basically there were a lot of I don't know if you're gonna want to edit this out or whatever, but like the thing I'm dancing around is I was listening to the Chad Daybell trial on my
Okay. Yeah.
listening to the Chad Daybell trial on podcast coverage of it, and then also just listening to it raw, like just listening to court proceedings. And I thought, they're making all these cases into true crime and everyone's kind of eating this up, and what's going to happen to these families? Like, how are they kind of picking up their lives after this devastation and such like darkness related to, religiously motivated violence? And I thought, this is bigger than me. This is a lot bigger than me. And I kind of took my ego out of it. And you have to just feel like you're going to throw up every time you ask a professor for advice or to look at your statement. And one of my professors, he looked at my statement and he just like ripped it to bits, and I could have cried, but he knew I was serious about this, and he was serious about helping me.
You said something to me. You put that into words a couple months ago. You said, I can either cry about this or I can what? What did you say?
I just sat down and I edited it for 6 hours. And
Okay. I
I was
think
like,
you put it succinctly. I think you said something like, I can either cry about it or I can learn about it, learn from it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no use in crying because he put all these comments on because he wants to help me because he actually see, and that's something I really miss from BYU is how invested the professors are in your growth, whatever that means.
Mhm.
Personally, academically, you don't have to be their star graduate student to get their attention. Like they just cared about you. Maybe the English department was special that way, but
Yeah, like, I
probably.
don't remember that, but I was
But
kind of I would, like, duck out of class because I always felt like I was underperforming, so I, like, never
oh,
wanted to show give eye contact with the teachers, but
I like go
yeah.
talk to them after class every time till they were sick of me. But that's just like what I would do because I was just wordy like
Wanna
that. So
probably model your college experience after Julia's and not mine.
I sat there for 6 hours in my bed, revised the whole thing for 6 hours, and not that you have to do it like that, but what I ended up with after that editing session was very close to what I ended up with at the end. You wouldn't even recognize the first one from the last one.
Right.
But um yeah, I think it took a lot of this feels like embarrassing or this feels personal or this feels I don't feel like the Harvard applicant, right? And I didn't feel like the student that my professors thought they were going to send to grad school. Definitely not. Because as much as I was very into the into the and it wasn't fake like, "Oh, I just want to talk about this after class." I was just nerdy. So what was that thing you said about Keats and
My
whatever?
gosh, they
And
must
let's
have
keep talking
loved you.
about it. And but I was always kind of sick, and I
Yeah.
needed an extension for this or that. And so I did not it wasn't the one they were inviting to be a research assistant. I wasn't the one they were inviting to publish their papers. And I learned you just have to do that stuff anyway. Like when I wanted to be a TA, I just emailed my professor over and over and said, I've taken all these sewing classes. I know you need my help. And she'd say, We've got it for this semester. And I'd email her again and again.
Yeah.
And
So you've always been really persistent, which I think is
yeah.
great.
And
And
you
it's not like you didn't have any voice in your head going, "No, don't do that." Like don't.
right.
Like because you just mentioned how, you might feel sick to your stomach, but you have to kind of let your ego know, "Hey, I've got this," and just do it anyway. And I love that. So you it sounds like maybe a lot of times it's not like you were just one of those people that like just doesn't care. It's like you did care, but you ignored that vulnerability and pushed
Mhm.
forward and did it anyway. I think that's probably a big key to how you got to where you are.
Mhm. Because I think we talk a lot about I mean, and just with psychedelics being such a thing right now, everyone loves to talk about ego death and this and that, and I could talk about psychedelics another day, but like there's I think people have a hard time holding confidence and ego at the same time. And they're not the same thing, right? Like this same professor who had ripped apart my essay, I tried to do a research grant with him and it wasn't a good idea. Just wasn't a very good idea. And I spent all night working on it and what I was going to pitch to him the next day, and he didn't like it. And I had to ask myself, are you doing this because you want a research grant or do you believe in this project? And I just wanted one more, it was kind of right before I graduated. I was like, oh, I should try this. They kept talking about it. I should try this before I graduate. It wasn't a good idea. And I wasn't motivated about it, and that's okay. And I was like, oh, great. So now I'm going to email him and say, hey, could you help me get into Harvard? And he's going to say, oh, not this girl again. And you just have to get over that. You just have to get over it. And you're gonna get ghosted from people if you try to email them sometimes. You're not gonna hear back. Some people aren't gonna believe in it.
And some
But
people like honestly don't have the time. Like you could have
mhm,
when they receive the email or the text or whatever, it's
mhm,
often not personal. Like there's so many times where I will get a text or an email and it just happens to come to me when I'm in the middle of doing something else and then I
mhm,
forget about it. So often it's not personal. So I think it's so important, like that persistence and just not worrying about it and just
Hmm.
trying. And eventually they'll let you know if it's a bad idea, you know?
Right. And he wasn't mean at all, but he just said, I don't really, and he was right. And but I thought I could be embarrassed about that, and now it's going to seem really embarrassing if I think he's going to recommend me to go to Harvard. But and I had another professor that I worked with at the art museum when I did a fellowship there, and he had said over and over to me, if you need a recommendation, let me know. Happy to do it, etc. I'd worked with him more recently. Um, I helped put together a retrospective on Brian Kershisnik. And what I loved about this, he's a Latter-day Saint painter. What I loved about this show by Brian Kershisnik, it was gritty. He has some
Mm,
more violent paintings, and not that I just love violence, but he's known for his kind of angels and women, kind of portraits of these serene women with angels around them. And that's not everything he paints. That's what people like to put on their walls of
right.
his work. And he
Yeah.
actually he dealt a lot more seriously with trauma and grief in his work. And I
Yeah.
felt that it was important to bring that to a Latter-day Saint audience. There's more than the pretty parts of life, and how we wrestle with our faith when those dark things happen, I think was something we didn't talk about enough. And so, and this director was friends with Brian Kershisnik and was running the exhibition basically. So, oh, we can talk about that. I never heard back from him on an email. I emailed him twice, and the deadline was getting closer and closer. And I
Yeah.
thought, I just have to let that go.
Right.
And so I emailed my other professor who I did study abroad with, and they said, don't do all the same. Your recommender shouldn't all come from the same department if you can help it. And all of mine were from English. And I thought, but he's
Yeah.
all I got. And so I emailed him, and he's a really good friend. And he came in clutch and wrote me my recommendation like right away. And I said, that's just gonna have to work. You
Yeah.
work with it, you got, and that doesn't mean doors don't close sometimes, or they just don't even, they never even opened. But I think you have to get really comfortable with number one, things not looking the way you think it's gonna look, and number
Right.
two, nobody's gonna just come walk up to you and tell you you're brilliant and you can do everything.
Right. And even
Maybe
if they do, you might not believe them because,
no. And it's really not, it's more about, I think, how tenacious you are and how clear your goals are
hmm,
more than anything, because
right.
there's plenty of people who are smart. There are plenty of people who have a 4.0. There's plenty of those in the world.
Well, and maybe too, if you don't necessarily believe in yourself, but you believe in what you're going to study or like why, like
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
very, I would imagine that's pretty powerful as a
Mhm.
motivator and as the thing that keeps picking you up. Like,
Mhm.
it's not about me necessarily, or it's not a personal rejection.
Yeah, like my statement started personal, and I basically say how this issue entered my life, and then I immediately launched into what I did with that at school, how that drove me to study trauma and incorporate that into as much as my coursework as I could, and
Yeah.
then end with, but here's where I need more, and here's what Harvard Divinity School has to offer, and here's
Yeah.
how, my goals relate to the mission of Harvard Divinity School, which is creating a just world at peace. Um, and once that was really clear to me, it's not just about, I think what was interesting was as I revised that essay, I didn't just have the nuts and bolts that they were looking for, because what they wanted was why you, why now, why us? Because
Mm,
they also really
okay.
want to know why it's resonant right now.
Right.
Not 5 years from now, not 2 years ago. Um, but that as that became clearer to me, I was more confident in how I approached all of it because I could see it myself. I put
Right.
together the why me, why now, why us. That became really clear for me. And then I thought if I don't get in, number one, this just isn't an environment where I can study this. And that's really what they're looking for. Do we have the faculty to support this? Do we have the coursework to support this? Is this a program that's going to fit for them? And has the student done the work to figure that out? Because a lot of times they haven't.
Right.
And they told me, like, make sure at the top of your essay to put the right school, which is crazy because you should write a different one per school if you really care and you really know what they're offering. But sometimes students apply to 10 schools at a time and they
Meaning
just
the
said,
different schools within the university.
no, just like Yale Divinity
Oh,
School or Chicago.
really?
I know. And so that's the thing. The other thing
Yeah.
is you think it's going to be so impossible for you, but you realize how many people might do that.
Hmm.
And it's not that they don't deserve it, it's just that they don't want it the same way.
Yeah.
Because they would have written a different one for Yale Divinity School if they knew all about their programs and their faculty, and Chicago Divinity School.
Right. And it
And
kind
so,
of goes back to what you were saying before about like when you were writing the grant, like, or, right? You were
mhm,
writing the grant. So you were writing the grant to almost to see if you could get the
do it.
grant. And I imagine so many people are like, I want to apply to Harvard so that I can go to Harvard.
And like as I was working on it, I felt 90% sure I would get a no. And I don't know why I felt that way, but I really felt that way. And I would ask myself, why am I still working on this when I feel like the stakes are, number one, so high and my chances are so low? But I thought, like I said, this is worth doing anyway. This is worth doing anyway if I really care about this issue. I have other ideas of how to maybe try to research this or get involved in my community with some of the issues that I was seeing, etc. And I thought, you don't know, and this is where it sounds like really cliche, but you really don't know that you can't do it unless you actually tried it.
Yeah. I
And
know, pretty basic stuff and so obvious, but I think we forget that all the
mhm,
time.
mhm,
Yeah, like let someone else be the one to tell you no rather
mhm.
than you telling yourself no.
When I had sat with a guy on a plane who was doing what do they call it? Do they call it Slavic literature? When it's like Russian and all the others. Something. I
I
had
think
sat on a plane with a guy when I was going to Massachusetts to visit my mom, and
where was
it was
he? Was he at Harvard?
he was at Harvard, but like I saw his bag or something, and of course, Harvard people are like, oh, I just go to a small school in Cambridge. That's like the joke, right? But he
Right.
was really modest about it. He wasn't really saying where he went to school, but I was just interested in what he was researching. And so we talked, and it was like a red eye flight, and I get migraines and the cabin pressure, whatever. So we just chatted with him the whole way. And I said, I always wanted to do that. Like, I love Ralph Waldo Emerson. I love Henry David Thoreau. They all went there. There's the chapel on campus where Ralph Waldo Emerson gave his most famous address, his most famous lecture, um, which is the Divinity School address. And he got kicked out. They never let him come back.
Oh,
They didn't like his message, but now it's famous.
we'll link to that in the description. That sounds interesting.
Yeah. And so I was really into the transcendentalists at that time, and I was just reading about them a lot. And the guy said, not everybody sits on a plane and is reading essays about the transcendentalists. Like, maybe you should do grad school. It's not just a casual activity. I like, oh, well, I don't know. And he said, you just don't, you could just try. Just try. The worst they can do is say no. And he said, I did, and I didn't think I would get in. Here I am. And I didn't
Yeah.
get his contact information or anything, but I remember trying to look up on the website and see if he had an email, if I could ask him questions, and I didn't find anything. But I thought that always stuck in my head too. That had been a while before,
Right.
but I thought, here's somebody that's done it, is on the other side. And that's the thing. The people that I go to school with are so encouraging of other people trying it. And I am too. I mean, if people ever want to ask me anything about it, like, you just really don't know what you can do unless you try.
Yeah.
You really
Yeah.
don't know you'll get a no unless you've actually tried really hard and gotten that
Mhm.
no.
Right. And it's the digging through all the cobwebs and finding that clarity of your purpose. That's probably where the hard work was. Like some of the hard work was
Mhm,
probably more, I imagine a lot of it was more mental than anything else. I mean, obviously it was all the hard work of doing all the research and, all
mhm.
the reading and all the revising and but also just that mental game. Like I think that's probably where the hardest part lies. And then it is funny when you finally find that piece that like really inspires you and then ends up sounding like a cliche. It's like
Mhm.
you've heard it a million times and yet it's the thing that once you integrate it, you go, okay. Like, yeah, I
Well,
won't
like,
know until I try.
people will say that about, I don't know, there's always the list, right? It's like Walt Disney, Thomas Edison, light bulbs, and all these uh greats who had been rejected and rejected and rejected, and you read that, and I do think it's true though, because how many of us can really take 3 doses of a lot of rejection,
Yeah,
right? And then these
right.
people have done it 15 times and been rejected. And the thing is, not everyone's gonna believe in what you think you need to do, and that doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, you're not really gonna convince them, because they don't necessarily live in your reality, and that's okay. Just like if they, you know, uh, talk to you about something that they're working on, and you just haven't lived their life and know where they're coming from, and you're like, "That sounds amazing, that sounds great." And then that's another cliche, is only really you need to know that this is, and then you need to show other people that you're willing to work hard, and you get the program and you understand and they're willing to endorse you. I think I was endorsed by my work ethic and character, but that doesn't mean all of my recommenders knew everything that I was talking about with
Right.
religious trauma, etc., and they don't need to.
Hmm.
That's the other thing. I think if you get too caught up in convincing the people around you and either of the urgency or importance of what you're trying to work on, it doesn't always happen, and that's okay too. And that can feel like rejection, and if you have a lot of self-doubt in yourself, it will feel that way. But again, it's not really that personal. It's rarely that personal.
Yeah.
Rarely do they even know enough about you for it to be that personal. And if I had
Sure.
gotten a no, it wouldn't have been personal either.
Hmm.
Even though I vomited up this very personal story and like given the last, September to March working on it. Because there's like a window where they say they might reach out for an interview, but you don't know. I kept working on it once it was in because I kept working on what I would say for my interview if I get the
Yeah.
interview.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Hmm.
Where are we in the story? So, have you submitted yet?
So yeah, I work in the.
By the way, I'm just going to say while she's chewing, she's eating a shortbread that I sent her.
It's so good.
Is it good?
It's
Like,
really good.
did it
Yeah.
last?
Mm-hmm.
The secret is I toasted the sugar first.
Mm.
Like I caramelized the sugar. You like roast it in the oven and then anyway. So,
No, they're great, and they're not dry and they're not stale either. They're not like they're perfect.
good. I'm
'Cause
glad
the
that you
edges
like
are
them.
crispy, but it's not. Yeah, you know when something's soft, but it's because it's like humid in your house and it got soggy
Yeah.
soft. It's not. They're perfect.
I think that might be from the sugar because when I cooked it, I
Mhm.
was expecting it to like go dry, like shortbread usually
Mhm.
does, but then it didn't. So I think it might be from
Mhm.
the caramelized sugar.
Yeah, no, they're perfect. Um, yeah, so I'm working this job that's driving me crazy, which I was grateful for, of course, but I wasn't using my degree, and
Yeah.
I was basically staring at a wall in a warehouse for months and thinking, what am I gonna do? But I just made it my other part-time job to work on this application for hours and hours every, week, sometimes every
Yeah.
day. And I kind of isolated, right? I didn't watch as much TV. I didn't do as much social things. I worked on it like a job.
Right.
And I submit, I keep working on it, like I said, just
When are they due? When did you submit it?
I want to say January 3rd. I think it was
Okay.
January 3rd because it was the day after my anniversary.
2024.
Yes, that must be, yeah. And then I waited like in agony, I guess, for only 2 months. And then
That
by
is a
March,
long time.
it's a long time, and I didn't know if I was going to get the interview, etc. But I also kind of let it go at that point. I thought I did my best. Here's what I can contribute. And this, I also just had a very strong, I'm not writing what I think they want to hear. This is going to be
That's big.
exactly what I want to do if I get in, and if it's not, I didn't want to go. And that
That's
sounds,
that's so big. Like that
yeah,
is yeah.
because I was in a graduate school prep class at BYU at one point for like humanities majors. And I said something to this professor, and I said, well, how do you know what they're really looking for at any given time? And I'd been told the transcendentalists weren't in anymore to research, even though like they're part of that whole intellectual history of New England and Massachusetts especially. We're kind of done talking about them, I guess. Like that's not new to Harvard. That's kind of the bedrock of everything around there, and so that's kind of been done. And I was sad because I thought, well, what if that's what I like? And so I said to this professor, well, how are you supposed to know what they want to hear? And what if it changes on any given year? And what if every school wants something different? And he just said, and it was good for me to hear, if you don't believe in it, why would you even want to go and do that?
Yeah.
And he was
Right.
totally right. There's like
Yeah.
a game that you're trying to play. But if you get too caught up in the game of it, of how to apply, what do they want to hear?
Hmm.
Number one, you're going to fail at catching that vision for every school you apply to, or job, or whatever it is.
That's great advice for writing. Like, you don't ever want to follow the trends. You want to write the book that means something to you. And, you know, trying to second guess your audience. I think anytime you're trying to like read the mind of a system or a person or anything, it's not going to be true to yourself and it's not going to feel organic and it's not going to come from that deep place in your heart unless it's sort of coming from the self and what really drives you and what really feels passionate and exciting to you.
Because then you're suddenly just going to come up empty. Everything you do is going to come up empty. When you get to the interview, what do you say? You'll say exactly what you wanted to say and what you actually feel if you treat it that way. Because you're not going to need to guess what they want to hear. I remember reading something about like The Cure, and they were the band, and they were not super successful, and they were kind of just doing it for fun. And they thought, we're not super successful. We're not really writing the kind of music that people are into right now, and we just don't care. We're just do the album we want to do. And that's when they finally like developed their sound and got the way people love them now and what they're known for, because even among other 80s music, sure, you can pick up certain sounds that sound similar, but I think The Cure has a very unique sound that you can pick out anytime you listen
Yeah,
to
and
it
such a
now.
unique perspective too. No one's looking at life through the lens that they are. But if they had
Mhm,
just tried to be what the studios wanted or what the labels wanted, then
mhm.
we might have like a one-hit wonder or something, but not The Cure.
Right, right. And yeah, again, that just sounds like another cliche, but it's true because if you don't have a clear sense of self and you're trying to contort yourself to fit all these different expectations,
Hmm.
it's never going to be clear for you.
Yeah.
And I think
And
that's true of
yeah.
anything. Like even in relationships, jobs, school. you write the paper you think they want, and then, well, they didn't actually like that. You might as well just write the paper that you think you want to write because it
Right.
doesn't matter. And then it'll ring true for some people, and some people engage with it, and other people won't. And that's okay too.
And you're never going to have that connection, right? Like if you're writing what you think you want, what you even if you get in, like if you write something, if you write an essay or if you say you want to research the thing that they're looking for, you're never going to touch ground, right? Like you're going to be constantly floating in this place where you're trying to produce what they want. It's never going to be grounded in anything personal. Let's say you get in, then for the next 5 years or however long it takes you to get out, maybe it's like a 3-year program?
Two. This is two.
Two.
But
Okay.
there
So
is
for the next 2 years. So for however long, you're going to be doing something that doesn't mean anything to you.
and I talked to another friend, and he looked over my essay and kind of helped me with it, and he said the best thing about your essay is that you're curious and you're humble and you have a very clear idea of what this problem is, but you're not writing it like I'm the perfect person to solve this, or I know everything about this and it's going to go A, B, and C without a hitch through the program and then I'm going to be done. And he said that's also what they're looking for, is that malleability, right? That doesn't mean you don't have vision. But if you
Yeah.
really care about this issue or this topic, you understand that you don't have all the answers and you're willing to dive in and have more questions than you have answers before you're done. And that's something that I don't know if would work at the law school or the business school, but at
Sure.
least at the divinity school, um, because my one professor, he kept saying, you've got to sound like a professional. Make this, how's this going to be a professionalizing degree? And then when I got here, I found people are a lot more, people can be very, I want to wander in the mountains and find myself. And that's okay too. But like, they're a little more open to that than maybe
There
here.
versus what the perception of somebody at BYU had. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
And he
Yeah.
had said to me, frankly, I don't know anything about this school. I don't know
Hmm.
what they're looking for. And it's your essay. So at the end of the day, you make the calls. But you
Right.
do want to sound like you have a goal for this. And then what was interesting is when I got in and I talked to people, everyone else says you have one of the clearest visions of why you're here, of anyone I've talked to. But see, that was constructive too. And that would have been constructive if I didn't get in, because I had this clear vision of this problem. You have to be willing to try things before you're fully qualified, right? I
Yeah.
didn't have a psychology undergrad. I studied trauma in 2 classes. And then I tried to work in a little bit of trauma in the art fellowship with the curation we were doing. And that was really all I had. And that's okay, because you say, well, this is the need of why I need to be here to do more of this.
Right.
So sometimes,
Exactly.
yeah, I think sometimes we focus too much on, um I have the credentials, I've done A, B, and C, I deserve to be here because of my degrees or whatever. And
Right.
those things are important, right? Like they're, I don't know, the more I think about it, like when I'd apply for jobs and it would say masters required, and it's like, do I really need that? It's a lot of work. It's a huge commitment.
Right.
Anyone that's finished a master's program or an undergraduate degree, you can call it a piece of paper, but I think it's more of it shows a commitment to something and a commitment to finish something. And I think
Yeah.
the most important thing is, uh the best thing about a university is the collaboration,
Right.
is getting
Because
outside of it.
it is a school at the end of the
Yeah.
day. Like you can come in
Mhm.
with all your professionalism or something, but I think there could be some amount of like being overqualified for a
Mhm.
program even. Like
Mhm.
because ultimately the whole idea is to sustain that curiosity throughout the 2 years that you're studying and
Mhm.
learning and discovering and hopefully bringing something to the school and discovering something that will add to the school and the body of research that it upholds, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. And when they say, the best reason to do it is networking. I don't know if I think definitely if you're doing the business school or the law school
Sure.
or whatever, but and also those people are very nice. Like I get lunch in the law school cafeteria sometimes and everybody's super nice in there. Um but this idea that you're here because you want to have conversations in the hallway. You want to learn something from some random guest lecturer who came to your class or whatever. And if you're actually curious and you want to expand your own perspectives, I mean, the part of the joke is we're always sitting in class like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Because you're constantly, it doesn't mean you're losing clarity, but you're willing to rethink your perspective. You're willing to
Sure.
rethink everything you thought, and you do have to be ready to let it all go and switch. And even my essay, I've changed a lot since in my first year, and what I think I'm actually going to do at the end is a little bit different than what I pitched, basically. And
Yeah.
that's okay too. They want to know that because that means you're actually engaging in the community and the things that you're learning. Because if you know everything, why do you need to come? Right?
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So when you got you're obviously there now. So you got your acceptance letter via email, right?
Yes.
I think I remember, I think we were texting at the time. Like,
Yes.
not, I don't think it was like right when you opened it, but it was like, I think we were in contact that day or something. I was very
I
excited.
got an email and it says like a decision has been reached and then you have to click to a different thing. But it
I
was
don't.
right before work and I knew I was going to be 15 minutes late to work. I
Uh-huh.
couldn't wait all day and check because I had to check on my laptop, not my phone, to get into the portal. And I just thought if I don't get in, I'm not going to want to go to work today. I'm going to want to call in sick. But if I get in, I'm going to be weird at work all day too. But so I just opened it and I was very sure it was going to be a no. I was kind of just waiting for
You're just like
the
reassuring yourself, like talking yourself through it.
yeah, I was waiting for I wanted the relief that came on the other side of that rejection so that I could move on. That sounds very sad, but that's how I felt. And I
Mhm.
opened it and it had this like little like confetti thing. It
Oh,
had like a
really?
little confetti animation and I thought that would be really mean if they put confetti over a no.
Now you know.
I was like, can you imagine? So I was reading it, but I
And then
wasn't
it's like
believing it.
skulls and
Yeah.
crossbones. Like it comes down like, congratulations, you're done with the process, but it's a no.
Yeah. I was like, it can't be confetti over a no. That would be really, or even if it was a glitch, that would be really sad.
Be horrible.
Kind of like when Steve Harvey read the wrong name for the Miss Universe or whatever pageant. I was like, oh, that would be awful.
Oh
So I got
God.
in. I
I
called
wonder
my
what it does if you don't get it. Does it just
I don't know.
like a
It's
sad
probably
thing?
no confetti. It's probably no
Yeah,
confetti.
no
Um,
confetti.
but I got in. I called my dad, which surprised me that I wanted to call my dad. Um, but he had said that I should try a long time ago, but I
Mhm.
don't think he knew why I would want to or what. But I don't know. I just called him. Also because he's
Yeah.
out here in East Coast and everything. And so I called him and he was really excited and then I went to work. So
How
that
was
was
work that day?
weird because I
Yeah.
I was though happy like because I knew I was getting out of there, even though I was very grateful for it.
Yeah,
It
but you're
just
like,
was
I'm out of here, suckers.
it was hard to be having pants in a small room and
Yeah,
still having a lot of I mean, and truly, like I said, concern for the issues that were going on. But I literally had like I had watched Under the Banner of Heaven and you can see the dream mine from the mountains that I would drive by to get to work. And you could see it from my house. And
yeah,
that's one of the settings in the story. I mean, in the real story, is
right.
this Nephite dream mine of gold that they're trying to build this like weird community underneath or whatever.
Yeah,
And so it literally shows like Andrew Garfield and like the actors there under the dream mine. I don't know if they really went there or if they CGI'd it or what, but I would listen to the Chad Daybell trial all day, drive by the mountains and like look up and kind of see this mine, and it felt like it was like literally looming over me. I'm right here. And then, the Ruby Frankie case and all of that. She's from Springville too. And the
Yeah.
Daybells lived in Springville at one point. I was working in
What?
Springville.
I'm in this
I'm like,
crazy
I
place.
felt like it felt like turning a blind eye to a lot of pain that I had some insight into if I didn't do this. And
Right.
that kind of gave me the drive to sit there and hem these polyester pants all day. Because like I wrote a piece too for Wayfair magazine. They're gonna publish soon. Um, Wayfair is really cool. I don't know if you'd want to read it. It's so this guy Zach Davis. He went to Harvard Divinity School, and
Okay.
then he started a podcast, and then he created like the whole Faith Matters Foundation, and
Okay.
they do their own magazine. It's really interesting stuff because it didn't have like the BYU stamp or the church stamp, so they can kind of say more of what they want. But it's
Yeah.
still Latter-day Saint and then other non-Latter-day Saint perspectives.
Hmm.
Um, but I wrote a piece about this, the tailoring, thinking about these bigger issues, thinking about pain too, just my own chronic pain and what I was supposed to do with that. And
Right.
the spiritual crisis that I was having. But that's the thing, I had to like dance around and like, what was I listening to while I was yelling? I was like literally listening to this murder trial, which is bleak but true. But I think there's deeper themes there. So I didn't say that in the piece. I just said I was thinking about pain and the spiritual crisis I had after a family trauma, essentially,
Right.
and talk about Keats and Thomas Hardy and William James interpreted through Latter-day Saint scripture of like cuz Keats had this idea of he calls it the veil of he didn't like the term veil of tears. He
Hmm.
thought it was like kind of sad and wimpy and depressing that you're just gonna cry through life and then it's over.
Right.
So he said call the world the veil of soul making and then you'll find out the use of the world.
Oh, I love that.
And he talked about intelligences, which is really interesting because the Pearl of Great Price talks about intelligences.
Yeah, like that's something very much in LDS Mormon theology.
Hmm. And
Hmm.
um, Thomas Hardy talks about living on this blighted star in Tess of the D'Urbervilles and what it's like to, they're looking up at the apple tree and there's like some apples are sound and others are blighted. And the little brother asks Tess, like, what kind of star do we live on? And she says a blighted one. And so basically I wrote about what it's like to live in this on this blighted star in this veil of soul making and kind of like infuse Keats and Thomas Hardy and William James into Latter-day Saint theology to like make sense of pain in a way that I liked better than
Right.
just you learn
Yeah.
something by being in pain or you suffer and then but anyway, I wrote that and
Wait,
it's
wait.
been
Go in case somebody's curious, like what would the LDS theology be about the suffering versus what you kind of uncovered in your paper?
like I was thinking about and I have it at the end actually, the hymn "Come Follow Me," and it's saying, that talks about a veil of tears, and it's like while traveling through this veil of tears, if with our Lord we would be heirs, kind of like heirs to the kingdom of God. I really think that the theology is deeper about pain than the culture and the teachings that we have, right? This idea of make every trial into a silver lining and smile your way through life instead of crying. I don't think that's what we actually see with Christ in the scriptures. Um, he was a what does it say in Isaiah 49? Could be wrong if I think it's 49. He was a man of sorrows acquainted with grief.
Right. Yeah.
And so I write about that as just like acquainted with grief, we've become acquainted with him. And if nothing else, that could be what the pain's for. But it's not to, it's kind of just about learning to be human. And pain is a part of this life. And I don't think there has to be a lesson on the other side of it. It's kind of just about gaining your soul, becoming more than just a body and more than just a spirit. Um, so in the end, I write and I say, I agree with Keats that this veil of soul making feels a lot more, because he died young. He had tuberculosis, and he
Yeah.
moved to Rome to try to. I mean, a lot of times they would move to a warmer climate and see if their health would improve, and he died there in Rome. A lot of people suffered from chronic illness way back then, and trying
Hmm.
to find this and he wasn't religious anymore. He grew up religious, but he had a deep belief in the divinity of all human beings and like the role of mortality, um which I really enjoyed. And so
Yeah.
William James is he's like, they call him the father of modern psychology, but he was the first professor of psychology anywhere at Harvard. So the psychology building here is William James Hall.
Okay.
Um, but he was kind of a theologian as well. So he
Okay.
started psychology used to be the study of the soul, not the study of the mind.
Right.
And he wrote the varieties of religious experience, which you think is going to be all these different religions, and it's
Yeah.
not. He actually talks a lot about mental health and grief, and he has this thing called there's a once born consciousness and a twice born consciousness. And the once born is you're just fine with life as it is. Your belief in God or anything, meaning whatever, has never been tested. You're kind of just moving through life and you're fine. But the
Right.
twice born consciousness have had some kind of crisis or break with faith or break with life or deep depression. And when they
Yeah.
come out on the other side of that, they they actually see life for what it really is.
Hmm.
And they
Yeah.
have it, he calls it like the unification of your divided self can only happen after all the grief, all the pain, where life
Right.
has gone out, life has become dark, and then you come out on the other side of it and you actually know who you really are.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
cliche, but I apply that to the Latter-day Saint theology, which honestly, I wish we talked about William James more because he's awesome.
Yeah. It's like a transmutation. Like it's the meaning that you create from the experience. It it turns into
Hmm.
something greater than the sum of our parts rather than just sort of useless suffering if
Hmm.
you're able
Hmm.
to make meaning out of it and kind of integrate it. Okay. So,
That's a tangent.
no, I love it's great. Okay, so when I say okay, so like a
Yeah.
lot, I'm
Well, that's okay.
hoping this will edit
Also,
it out.
everyone does at Harvard, by the way. I thought I would say like or too much. That's just a human thing.
It
Everyone does.
is.
Everyone does
Right.
in class. Even professors do. Like,
Yeah.
see, I just did it again. It's just a thing. I used to think, oh, I'm gonna have to train all my like speaking habits out of myself and be this different thing when I got here, and it's just not the case.
Good to know. Good
Yeah,
to know. Yeah, what do you like to tell people when they're wanting to get into Harvard or some other school?
I'd say, and this is the one that is like some people worry about, but I mean, this is more if you're in school now, get to know your professors. You really should. You really should, and you really should care. And your professors are more interested with questions than you answering every question they have perfectly. They like curious students, like, how does this, concept of, you know, whatever and what we're reading apply to this theory? And like you're genuinely asking them. You're not
Mhm. Not
putting
trying
some
to impress him by the
yes.
fact that you know what that theory is.
And you can do that, and you should say, I noticed on page 72, they love that because it shows that you actually read and you're engaging with the material, which is good for you to do anyway, right? But you should get to know your professors, definitely get to know them in office hours outside of class, and just genuinely engage with what other people have to say in class, right? If you're in class and someone makes a comment, raise your hand and say, "Oh, I really like that. And what do you think about this?" Because if you can kind of boost other people's comments, that shows a lot of humility and also just engagement in academic intellectual
Right.
community that you're in. So, and make that a real part of who you really are and what you want to learn, because I was doing that intuitively. I didn't
Yeah.
know that
I
that
was
was
not doing that intuitively. I
because
think if
I
I could
get
go back
there.
now, I would be like that, but not at the time. I was like not even close
Yeah.
to that mindset.
I
So
think
you
if
were
you
doing it
can,
intuitively, but then you must have had some awareness that you were doing it and going, hey, this is a good thing that I'm doing.
I found that out um kind of later. I mean, once I got to Harvard, that's exactly what they want you to be doing.
Yeah.
Because you were humble enough to learn from the other people in the room with you. And that says a lot more than how smart you are or if you did the reading, because everybody's smart. And I'll just say that everybody's smart. I mean, not just at Harvard, anywhere. There's
Hmm.
so many smart people, and there's so
Yeah.
many ways of measuring intelligence and all these things and these hoops you think you have to jump through. But everyone's smart, everyone's worth learning something from. And so, number one, if you're still in an academic environment, cultivate that within yourself, that curiosity and humility of learning from the people you're around. Number one, you'll learn a lot more. And then when your recommenders write you a letter, they're going to mean it because they've
Right.
seen how you are in a classroom.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and two, I mean, I just keep thinking of that quote by C.S. Lewis in, I don't remember which book, but the one where he's like, if you, if we knew who we were talking to, and this is everybody, if we knew who we were talking to, we'd want to worship them as gods. Is like,
yeah,
you remember
yeah.
that quote?
It's like it's a serious thing to be in a room with potential gods and goddesses, and if you knew who they would be in the next sphere, essentially, you'd be sorely tempted to worship them. And I think that's true. If you've been out of school for a long time, I go to school with so many people who are mid-career, never thought they'd be doing their masters, had a completely different life, family, kids, whatever, no family, no kids, worked in business, worked in law, whatever, and they're still doing it. So, on the other hand, don't discount that of I don't have recent professors who can write me a recommendation letter.
Right.
Um, on the website, they have a lot of tips for that. If, hey, what do I
Okay.
do? I've been out of school for a long time. Know
Mm-hmm.
what your school is looking for with that. Oh, well,
Mm-hmm.
can a different colleague, because in those ways, peers, they're a peer, but can a boss talk about you and what you're interested in now, etc. And so you should know what your school is looking for that way. I think the second thing I would recommend is, like I said, make this something that you want to do anyway. I was reading all of this stuff anyway. I was going to be reading it anyway. I was already listening to all this content, reading the news, reading books. Right, like the books I read were, I read Educated by Tara Westover. I read Under the Banner of Heaven. I was just doing that anyway. Kind of like
Mm-hmm.
that guy said to me before, who's just sitting on a plane reading essays about the transcendentalist? I was doing that for fun. So
Right.
be reading, be engaged with the things around you, because number one, it might give you an idea of what you want to research, and
Mm-hmm.
you're just going to sound so much more well informed. And you don't have to make it a panic of reading everything all the time, but just stay engaged
Right.
and connected. If you've been out of school for a while, you should still be reading as much as you can, I think,
Yeah.
on
Well,
the
and
things you care about.
absolutely. And like I try to pay attention to um when I'm doing things myself that are a so that. Like if I'm like reading, sometimes I will read some things so that I can write this book about it, or I will wash the dishes so that I can cook something, or I will do something so that, like everything's a so that, right? But when we do it like that, if you're just doing all these things so that you can get into Harvard, or so that you can, you know, do something bigger that you think is more important than the thing itself,
Mm-hmm.
then I think that it does that weird thing where you're not really grounded anymore. You're not connected to what the thing is.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're doing it, you're reading so that you can find out about what that thing is. So it's not really a so that anymore. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that's just what you do because you're interested in it and because it's important to you, rather
Mm-hmm.
than it's going to have some end that's going to pay off in some other way. It's like it's not
Yeah.
transactional, I guess.
Yeah, and like Cam and I had a calling at church. We were facilitators for a course on emotional resilience with the youth, with the teenagers. And I thought, this is when I still didn't know if I was even going to get in Harvard. And the way this class is set up is you have a workbook and you follow the workbook because they really don't want you to go off script, especially if you're not a professional mental health provider, which I think is good that they don't want you to go off script because that could get,
Or
who knows.
dicey.
But as I was doing that, I thought, if I really care about this intersection between spirituality and mental health, I should be giving this everything I've got, even if I'm just following this handbook, even if it's
Mm,
just in this prescriptive way, even. But the
yeah.
way I actually engage with these teenagers and try to help them should be my A plus effort. Like as if I was if as if this effort is part of the whole Harvard thing. That should matter to me anyway. And so then when I
Mm,
put that on my application, I could say I've already done 2 rounds of this volunteer emotional resilience class for the teenagers in my community about the intersection between spirituality and their mental health. And
yeah.
then I could speak to that experience in my interview with real care instead
That's
of saying,
powerful.
this is just a volunteer thing I'm doing at church. Maybe I'll never get out of this town and I'm just following a handbook and I don't get to do my own research. If you have that attitude about everything, I think you have to have a generosity to the things you approach and the roles
Yeah,
that you're given. And
absolutely.
even with the job that I was getting bored with, something
Hmm.
that really changed my perspective there was, well, I'm really bored. But this girl that I'm training, I should invest in her like a real person and teach her everything that I know because if I'm planning to leave possibly, she's going to need to know, but also if I can start to see her as someone that I would have like when myself at Nordstrom when I learned the tailoring, the people that invested in me and helped me learn the skills, I could be that for her. And so when I switched that mindset around, the days were easier. And I suddenly had this gratitude too for the job that I was bored with and maybe didn't want to stay in
Yeah.
forever. But I
Yeah.
thought, like, as small as the roles or the environments that you think you're in, or even people that you're around with you think that can't serve you, or you want something different or you want something better. I did learn, I think, at that job and as I was applying, I should really have more generosity and engagement with all of these opportunities that I have to learn,
Yeah.
regardless if I get into Harvard or not. So I
Sure.
think if I could distill that into like one thing of advice is just like I said before, everybody has something to teach you. Everybody has something you can learn from. And even in the environments where you feel stuck or you feel stifled or you feel bored, you can learn something there too. And that was the podcast, right? So I'm doing this job where I have time. I thought I might as well be learning while I'm here. So I put in my
Yeah.
headphones and continued my research while I was sewing, technically.
Yeah.
So that's another advice I'd say is like really be engaged. I guess that goes with the first piece, but be engaged with the people and the environments around you that you can already learn from because
Yeah.
that mindset, they're looking for that and they're not. the admissions board, they know the difference between checklist items on a resume and something you really engaged with. Because you
Yeah.
could list 100 cool things on your resume, but if they ask you about it in the interview and you can't talk about it compellingly, it really doesn't matter that it's there.
Right. Yeah. I love all of what you just said because it is so vital. And I think that I mean, when I'm reading between the lines, when I hear that, I just think how important it is to have your own mental health, like to bring to the table so that you're sort of more an embodied person. Like I just keep comparing your experience to my experience and how different we approach things because I was always trying to like meet the checklist and didn't really have great grounding in myself or not really I wasn't really embodied in that place where I could really be present. Like I would hear advice like that, like just treat everyone like they're amazing and be generous and like I could do it, but it wasn't like, you know, deeply
Hmm.
rooted. So how important like was that something that came naturally to you or have you had therapy? Like what is it that like
Oh,
made
yeah.
you be able to embody those aspects of yourself so that you could be really grounded and really generous and present with all those people.
I wonder if honestly it comes from being homeschooled,
Okay.
in that, like, whenever I was in a structured environment, I was starved for it and excited to be there.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
the other
that might
caveat, is
make a
everyone's
big
like,
difference.
"See, the homeschooling, you got into Harvard." I'm like, by the skin of my teeth, I had to work really hard. There's nothing wrong with homeschooling, but I remember doing seminary, like early morning seminary classes, and I had this seminary teacher, and sometimes I'd miss class either because if I was sick or it's really cold. It's just very cold in Massachusetts at that time in the morning, and sometimes my mom didn't want to drive. So I had to do these makeup lessons, and I would hand in the makeup work, the font, written this, and or calling her professor, my seminary teacher, she was awesome. She's like, "These are amazing, but you can do half as much. This is so much work." But I loved
Yeah.
it because I love the structure. So
Mhm.
I wanted to
And then
learn
that
everything.
validation.
Yeah, I wanted to learn everything and do everything because I really cared. I cared about which is funny looking back because people said, "Did you ever see yourself at divinity school?" I loved seminary. I was hauling my little scriptures to church when I was 12 and kind of flipping around and answering questions. I've kind of been doing this my whole life. I just didn't see it that way.
Isn't that funny how your life you're like, "No, I would never." And then you
Yeah,
do see it from that perspective and go, "Oh, okay. There was some evidence a long time ago that that's where I was going to
right.
be happy." Yeah.
So it could be that, and then just feeling a little behind on life, I think. Feeling a
Mhm.
little, I took longer to graduate. I always had these health problems. So, anybody and anything, an olive branch, someone that trained me. So, yeah, someone that ripped my papers apart and told me if they weren't good in parts. Like, anybody that really cared about me and invested in me to help me learn, I wanted to be that for anybody else I come in contact with if I have the chance to.
Yeah.
Um, So I think feeling behind, feeling like my undergrad was taking too long because of my health issues, feeling behind as a homeschooler, right? I wrote my first research paper like a personal essay because I'd never written something like that. And I remember being so embarrassed because I got the feedback from my professor and he's like, "This is really cool. Cool story, but you're supposed to just kind of do a research paper." And I'd never done anything like that.
Right.
So
Because research papers suck. That's why.
yeah, and they were
Expository
different.
essays.
It was about
Yeah.
Pride and Prejudice, so, like, how could I was making it, I guess, more of a personal interest, and that's fine, but
I bet it was a
anyone that
great paper.
yeah, I hope. And anyone that kind of gave me a foothold in this whole journey, as and then I was like, I need to be that for other people.
I love
Even at
that.
this, I think it was a BYU professor who we were on a call about how to manage academia and faith if you want to go into working in academia. And he
Yeah.
said that he used to go to Sunday school and people would make comments he thought were really boring or not that interesting. And he kind
Uh-huh.
of said he felt almost like struck by God one day to say, "You're being really arrogant right now. Like maybe you have something like there's your school you that's doing critical theory and your PhD, and then there's this other you that's here, and you know be that person and take these comments generously and engage with them, regardless of how smart or unsmart they sound, or if they don't sound, theory enough for you, then maybe something's wrong with you, not this environment."
Mm.
Which is a tough pill to swallow, but he said it changed everything because it changed everything about how he did his own scholarship too. Just with
Interesting.
more humility and more, yeah. I engaging with the other people around you is huge.
I mean, people might say that, like engage with your professors, engage with the people around you, but it almost sounds like it would be just kind of on a checklist and people would be like, "Yeah, yeah, I do that." Um,
Mhm.
but I think it sounds much more central to the whole experience than people probably realize. Like
Mhm.
it, and at the very least, even if it is something that's just a checklist for other people, if they're not really doing it, there's something to be so like something so much more valuable by doing that and kind of approaching life in that way, approaching school in that way, that is going to broaden and deepen your whole entire experience, not just here, but
Mhm.
throughout everything. Like that's really powerful.
Mhm. Yeah, it is, and they've seen a lot of students, and the admissions board have talked to a lot of students, very accomplished resumes. Someone's always going to have a better resume than you.
Sure.
Someone's always going to have a better GPA than you. Someone's going to have done 5 more extracurriculars and started a nonprofit by the time they were 15. Those
Mm-hmm.
people exist, and I go to school with
Right.
them. And I'm not that person. And I still got in. And I still have valuable things to share because, and that's the thing. You have to see those people as they must have started a nonprofit at 15 because they really cared about it. And they've been dedicated to this for a long time. So there's nothing um superficial about those commitments either. But
Mm-hmm.
you can't compare yourself, but you have to be really genuine, like even with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think that's where that engagement can come from a really meaningful place, and other people sense it as genuine. Is if you really care about what they have to say, whether it relates to your research or not,
Right.
whether you're trying to make friends with them or not. You're just asking because you care. And I think, yeah, that goes a long way for sure.
Yeah. Right. And good advice too for not just if you're trying to get into divinity school, but in all of those situations. I mean, I think if you were to be in the law school or the business college or school, yeah, just like moving away from that transactional nature of networking, but like really truly caring. And I mean, I see that with my husband and the work that he does. Like, he's constantly interacting with people in the publishing world, and he makes really good contacts and really does care, and it always ends up paying off, even though it was never for the intention of it paying off at some point. It was always just because he truly cared and he was truly curious about people
Mhm.
and their experience. Yeah. So, all right, so what else? This is all good stuff, Julia.
Yeah,
Okay,
they
so let's talk about the interview.
yeah. So the interview was I got an invitation to interview, and like I said, between the time of submitting and getting the interview, I kept researching because I thought if they're going to ask about this, I want to be able to talk about this. If they're going to ask about that, I'm going to want to know about that. So I continued to research. I continued to treat it like I was working on the application,
Yeah.
um, rather than either A, think I had it in the bag, which I definitely didn't feel like I did, or B, think I'm probably not going to get an interview anyway, so don't bother. I treated it like I was going to get one, and
Mhm.
just in case. And so I think the interview was 15 minutes, which is crazy.
The interview was
Very
only
short.
15 minutes?
Very short.
Oh my gosh.
And I will say too, at least with HDS, they put everything on a website. There's an admissions blog. There's no
Wait,
secret.
HDS stands for Harvard Divinity School. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. So they have what to prepare for the interview, how long it's going to be, what you should wear, and, you know, which they say just wear whatever you feel comfortable in, basically. But all of that's there, which is amazing, and they don't have any tricks. There's no trick. There's no secret formula. It was all on that admissions blog. You just had to really read it and know what was on there.
Yeah.
Um, so for the interview, I get on, you get on Zoom, and you really only have 15 minutes. 15. So they say, don't tell us anything you've already told us in your application because we've already read it
Oh,
carefully.
you're such a smart cookie preparing other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So what
I
did
would
they
say,
Oh,
what did it
sorry.
ask? Kind of a blur too. But
Okay, that's fine. You just tell me what happened.
yeah, I basically talked about they asked I think a little bit about some of my church volunteer roles,
Okay.
and then they asked about I think they said something like if there was something that you would wish there was room for on the application to talk about but you didn't have the chance to, what would you say?
So
And
what
that's
did you say?
there I just elaborated more on more of the cases of spiritual abuse or trauma that I was religious trauma that I was seeing in the news and reading about that I wanted to elaborate on more. So I talked about those things. And I did even talk about like they asked how I kind of came from the space that I was in to the space I was in now, kind of recovering from my own religious trauma. And I didn't expect to share this or know if it was what they wanted, but I told them it was teaching nursery. I mean, it was teaching, sorry, the sunbeams at church, the 4-year-olds. I was teaching class with them.
Right.
And I said it was just this very healing experience to be with children and kind of start with my faith from the ground up and see which parts of it still resonated and which didn't, and kind of
Yeah.
heal that part of myself again, like working with children and starting over. So they said, number one, how did you recover from this? But what what do you think contributed to that recovery? And I
Yeah,
said,
and how did you hang on to your faith and everything
yeah,
too, probably?
I'd shared in the beginning of my essay my own experience with religious trauma and some dissociation. And he asked what grounded me through that experience. And I said, it was actually just serving in my church community with children and teaching the 4-year-olds about prayer and about God and like making it safe for them and making them
Yeah.
feel like they had autonomy in their relationship with God was really healing for me. Um,
Mhm.
and it kind of provided me with a framework to kind of comb through everything from the beginning and
Yeah.
almost start over with my faith that I found to be really healing. And so,
Yeah, I think that's really powerful too, because like the I remember teaching in primary and looking at Matt, like we had first gotten married and I was having kind of some struggles with my own faith but we were in the primary room and I
mhm,
was like, this is so refreshing. Like
yeah,
it is
yeah,
so nice to not, there are just so few weeds in here with everything else in the religion, but we're
hmm
just like back to basics and trying to be like Jesus. And it was so much easier.
hmm And I think that I think that question led into where I was able to talk about that emotional resilience class I mentioned before, and
Yeah.
working with the youth and working with a program that I actually really love that program because it's very clear about here's where, prayer or your religious community can help. And in all the research I've done at school now, that's like a huge protective factor for suicide, depression. It's just engagement in community. And so in a lot of ways where people say religion's good for mental health, it's really just that community piece. If you have a good religious community, is
Yeah.
honestly almost more powerful than the beliefs themselves in some cases. But um I like the book because it really talks about the limits. It's like you might need professional help, you might need a therapist, and it even talks about anger and how anger isn't always a bad thing and what your anger might be motivating you to kind of resolve with yourself or address with someone else who's harmed you. And I really
Yeah.
like it because it's so frank and it doesn't try to do this.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of this and this and this and this, and if this isn't working for you, you might need professional help. Or um if you're already getting, like, that's what I really love, is this idea of I'm going to see a therapist and maybe pray that this session goes well, or
Right.
pray for some of the issues that we bring up in the therapy session. It really doesn't need to be an either or.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really just about expanding the tool set if that's something that you resonate with. If religion or faith or spirituality is addressing mental health with two or three things instead of just one, is always going to yield better results, whether
Yeah.
because the things are working in tandem or just because you're like, well, I don't know if it was this or this that helped, but I was doing several things and something kind of helped there. So I think that's what
Yeah.
they asked me about. And then there was supposed to be a couple minutes for me to ask them questions about the school, and I ran out of time,
Okay.
and I was worried about that.
Wow.
But I think it went fine.
Yeah. What do you wish you had asked?
I knew what I wanted to know. I'd already dug into all of it.
Oh,
So
okay.
I think I had written down, like, not a fake question, but a question to ask if there was time for that. So it would sound like I did have questions, but I dug into it so well. I knew exactly what they offered, how the program works, um, the timeline, cross registering for other classes in the university, all those things. I think I was going to ask about, can I take classes outside the divinity school, and which ones usually translate well into the kind of research that I was doing, or which program. But I already knew that you could do that. So I ended up being fine there. But he said something like, we only have 3 minutes left. Do you have any questions for me? And it was kind of overwhelming. So it's very
Yeah.
fast. You have to just, I think the first half was definitely getting to know you. They kind of want to know your personality because they've
Right. They
already
want to
read a
know if,
little about you.
yeah, they want to know if they want to hang out with you. That's important.
hmm So
Hmm.
they asked about, I think he just said something nice about, like I'd mentioned before. He said, oh, you did a lot there and you did well. And all this time I was thinking, my transcript goes from spring 2013 to spring 2023. And they're going to ask me why it took 10 years to finish a 4-year program. And you can't do that at Harvard Divinity School. You have to finish it on time. You have to
Okay.
petition for part time, and it's really, they don't always approve it. I don't know anyone doing part time.
Okay.
So I was worried about that. And then I don't think I was worried they would ask anything about my health, but I put that on the application, and there was a little box for, is there anything that you haven't been able to share that you want to share? And I explained, my transcript looks like this because I've struggled with not mental health, but um, a little both, I guess, but mostly the chronic health issues this whole time. And that's why it looks like that. So I explained that, and they didn't ask, and they have really good um, people that work with you with accommodations and things, and they had a really nice lady. She just left to go back and be with her family, but I really loved her.
Yeah. That's great. What other advice would you give?
I think just that, like I'd mentioned before, meeting that guy on the plane who said, I did it. You just don't know you can't do it unless you do it. I think he's the one that told me that. I don't
Right.
know who he is or what his name was. I still don't know, but he's right because you can come up with all these things in your head of I'm not good enough at this, or I'm not the Harvard student. I'm not the student that my professor. I just kept thinking I'm not the student that my professor sent to grad school. I was never invited to be a research assistant. I didn't run a committee. I didn't do any of that stuff. And you just have to let that go. You have to really let that go. And that doesn't mean don't work hard. I definitely had decent grades. I had good grades, but I didn't have a 4.0. Um, I I think it was a surprise to my professors that I was doing it, and that's fine too.
Yeah.
And I think that applies to everything. They're just quite busy, but these are really good, grounded, humble, amazing, kind people there. And so whether you have kind of preconceived notions about a university or a job environment or a community you want to be a part of or whatever, the best thing to do is just try it and just see. And it sounds silly, but you do have to keep believing in yourself. Because,
Yeah.
like I was saying earlier, I got in the first week of classes, I cried. I thought, I'm not cut out for this. I don't belong here. Everybody's going to feel that, and everybody does at some point. And I
Yeah.
got my grades back from the first semester and had straight A's. I never got
Wow.
straight A's at BYU. They really value participation in a different way in grad school. And so, kind of the dynamics I explained before about being a generous listener and engaging with community, that showed up a lot as part of my grade, I think. Because I
Yeah.
knew students who maybe I thought were smarter than me or could write better papers than me that didn't really engage in class and they didn't get as high of a participation grade, because that's what really matters. So
Right.
I think the thing too is you sometimes pull off this huge thing and then you think there was a mistake. They shouldn't have let you in, or you
Right.
turn in an assignment and you get some feedback that you're like, oh, I can't believe I did that. I messed that little thing up. And if you, in a way, like I thought getting into Harvard would change everything about how I viewed myself and my self-worth, and it maybe changed a little, but not as much as you think.
Right.
So you
You're
really,
still
and
having
that,
self-doubts and everything.
yeah, it sounds cliche, but you really have to have that grounded sense of self
Yeah.
anyway, or you can't do it in the end. You
Mhm.
get in and then you're doubting yourself the whole time. So then you can't do it because you're in a mindset of, I don't belong here, I don't fit in, or I don't, whatever the thing is, or whatever the effort you're trying to do. So that deep sense of self has to come from you, and you're never going to get it from, I got straight A's, and then the next semester I panicked thinking I can't do it again. There's no way I could pull it off a second time. So
Yeah.
that will follow you until you resolve it, essentially.
Where do you turn to find that grounded sense of self? Where do you go if you start to lose sight of that, or it kind of you become untethered? Like, how do you go back and ground that feeling of self?
Yeah, I think and this is gonna sound cliche too, but like during the first weeks of school where I felt really lost, because also my health issues kicked into overdrive. I mean, they've been here, but I ended up
Right.
needing to get a surgery last semester in the middle, and I just thought, wow, okay, this is all hitting me at once. But where I sit in my bedroom, I can look out the window and I see the little angel Moroni of the Boston Latter-day Saint Temple, like right
Oh,
over the
okay.
trees, and it kind of glowed. And I was like, that is weird. Why is it glowing? And we couldn't figure out what was glowing. We thought it was a drone or something. But there's
Uh-huh.
this little like golden angel peeking over the trees, like in straight into my room. And if I look for it every night, I can see it every night. And I think just remembering the purpose of why I'm doing this
Mhm.
really gave me that deeper sense of self, because it's not me, it's not my mind, it's not just my body and what I can pull off for this day, or if I get another A, or if this professor likes me or doesn't like me, or answers my email or doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
The people I was hoping to help heal and like the problems I was trying to address, just kind of the way they felt huge to me in Utah still felt huge to me now. And I was
Right.
like, if I'm meant to be here and help anyone with the trauma they might be facing in any way, however they feel like they need to address it, but just this intersection of religion and mental health. If
Yeah.
I'm really meant to help people with this, it's going to work out. And it's bigger than me, and it's bigger than my body and my brain and my faculties,
Mm-hmm.
because I really, and that's just true, I really felt like I couldn't have pulled this off by myself. I felt
Mm-hmm.
like I was led. And whether that's you're religious or you're not religious or you're spiritual, I do believe a lot in energy and forces of, you have a purpose, you have a meaning, and whether you believe in God or not, I think everybody has a purpose or a meaning, and can do good and lift where they stand, or whatever the phrase is. But that's true. And if you're looking outside of yourself and you want to serve and you want to help, I think the universe, whatever you want to call it, will conspire together with you to make that happen. If you're trying to be in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, I think you'll find what you need.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to let go of you being the best or smartest or most capable person to make that happen. And if you believe in that bigger purpose, it's
It's so, yeah, and
come.
it's so interesting how finding that sense of self, it still comes back to you when you when you step outside of yourself. Like it sounds like when you're all wrapped up in yourself and
Mhm.
about the maybe the accolades or whatever could come from outside. If you're searching for something outside to fill you or make you
Mhm. Mhm.
whole somehow, that doesn't work. But when you step outside yourself and like sort of step more into purpose, then that sense of self becomes integrated.
Mhm.
Does that?
Yeah. No, I definitely think so. I
I think
really do.
that's fascinating.
And even if you don't have, you know, some kind of social justice crusade or whatever it is like that, what if you just want to earn more to take care of your family, and then that's what's motivating you, or get a job that you really care about, or whatever. I still think that yeah, you have to really get out of the way of your own way to pull it off, because you're finally in the room, right? You're finally in the rooms you want to be in, but there's a work required to kind of continue to make it work for yourself, right? Like, I remember I took a class and was at the medical school, and I'm sitting in a room with a bunch of people that are Harvard Medical School doctors and residents, and I thinking, what am I doing in here? I don't know if I
Yeah,
belong in this room. And then
right.
later the professor said to me, she gave me this big hug and she said, I am so glad you're in our class. You really have like brought out things that I think we needed to discuss in this class. And
I love that.
if I'd stayed in my shell or felt like I didn't have anything to say in this room of other people who I felt were more accomplished or more qualified than I was, then I wouldn't have shared. And that's the thing, you're always going to be in a room where you feel like maybe the room just keeps getting smarter and more accomplished anyway, right?
Right.
You're going to
Yeah.
go in the door and everybody's a Fulbright scholar. Or I was reading something about someone who was like voted top 15 students to change the world at Penn State University. And I definitely don't have that to put in my bio. And it doesn't matter, because I'm sure if I met and talked to that person, they'd probably be very generous and interested in what I had to say. And that's been my experience here. And so you can't let that get in the way. You just have to keep doing things.
Yeah.
or you'll always be crippled by that somehow. You'll always let that get in the way. Because I remember being at BYU and thinking I didn't belong there.
Mm.
And then I was in the room in the Future Scholars program, and I thought they're all going to get into grad school, and I'm not. I don't belong in this room. And you'll just keep passing it over and
Yeah.
over until you decide you do belong in that room.
Mm-hmm. Well, and somebody said, who was it? I heard a quote recently where, like, you don't really ever want to be, if you're always the smartest one in the room, then you're in the wrong rooms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I love that because and that's certainly something that that you've brought to you or sort of attracted by being curious and talking to people, like that's going to keep putting you in the right kinds of rooms.
When I watched Aaron Brockovich, I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I actually haven't. I should.
It's
That's.
so good. I think it's a cliche because everyone talks about it, but
Mhm.
she it's about a real story, and it's this woman who I think she's a single mom, and she's kind of working as a secretary at this law firm just to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And she discovers this secret about this, corruption in this pharmaceutical company or something like that in the water that's in this town. And she solves this whole case and sues this huge company and saves all these people and gets them, the money because they get cancer from
Right.
what's in the water and all of these things. And she's constantly in these rooms where people think she doesn't belong in the room.
Mhm.
She doesn't have the credentials. She doesn't have the legal training, and she does it anyway. She just keeps interviewing these people anyway. She keeps digging anyway. And I love
Mhm.
that because and so I think I would add to it, you know, you if you're the smartest person in the room, you should be the most curious too. The most
Right.
curious person in the room or generous or whatever it is. And then you'll get in rooms where you can actually help people. I don't know. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? But it's such a good movie because and it really kind of breaks down the stereotypes of like who we listen to and why and who we think has the power to change anything.
Mhm.
Um and it kind of gave me a lot of because there's so many things you can do while you're at Harvard, intern, be a research assistant, whatever. And because of my health, I've been mostly just doing the coursework
Mhm.
and doing my best with that. So you can still feel like you're not doing enough, even if you're in. But then
Sure.
it got me feeling like, okay, even when I leave here, I can still be involved in my community and help out because it's just cool to watch how, and it's a true story about Erin Brockovich, how she kind of just pushed her way into those doors, even
Mhm.
when she wasn't invited, even
Right.
when she didn't feel qualified, because she knew
Yeah.
what she was doing and she had a reason and she had a purpose. And she was right. And she ended up like helping a lot of people.
Yeah. That's really cool. Okay. What is there anything else that you want to say? Any like last piece of anything that is like if you had a little check-in with your heart right now, what would be the one thing that you would want to leave people with?
I think definitely sometimes you're waiting for the right job or the right program or the right, endorsement or whatever to feel like you know what you're doing and why. And in between semesters now, I have the summer to kind of think about what I'm taking next term. And some of my goals have changed a little bit. And I think it's just really important not to wait for that. It's really important not to wait for that approval or recognition or validation from anyone else. And you'll get those moments and they matter. I think it really matters to validate other people. I think it really matters to recognize other people because you can be that for them that they're looking for. But if
Mm-hmm.
you're not seeing it and you're not feeling it or finding it, that doesn't mean what you're doing is any less legitimate or real
Yeah.
or true. And I think in a way that's because only you can really know what you're trying to do and why. And and I the first year was really hard But by the end of the second semester, middle to end, I started to meet people and connect with people that really believed in my work. And they weren't all at Harvard. A lot of them were students at Harvard that connected me with someone else back in Utah who they happened to know who's Latter-day Saint, who are working on the kinds of things I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
And um, so that validation and that recognition and that connection came late, and it almost felt quite late. And as I continue, you'll be desperate for those times. And I think you still just really need to have that strong sense of self and purpose and why you're doing what you're doing. And just
Yeah.
trust that they'll come when they need to come, because you're going to feel like you're in free fall no matter how much you accomplish if you
Right.
don't kind of have that sense of
Yeah.
self. And don't wait for it. Don't
Mm-hmm.
wait for anyone else's approval. Don't wait for anyone else's green light. Just
Yeah.
try it.
Yeah.
And remember that, I think, and this kind of goes back to things that I said earlier, it's worth doing anyway. Expanding your mind is worth doing anyway. Reading a whole book instead of reading a tweet is worth doing anyway. And talking to the little kid outside your house who just scraped their knee is worth doing anyway. And cheering them up. Like, all of those little efforts in life, you once you kind of, it's hard to do, but if you really try to be present in all of those things,
Mm-hmm.
it's all worth doing anyway.
Yeah.
Regardless of, I'm kind of tired of this thing of I don't owe anyone anything and nobody owes me anything, and how's
Mm-hmm.
this serving me, and boss babe, and networking,
Mm-hmm.
and getting that bag, and all these things that we
Right.
talk about that are exhausting. And
Yeah.
just, there's so much worthwhile things to invest in that matter anyway, no matter how you see them play out for you later or in the moment. And so, I mean, that's just kind of a roundabout way to say don't wait for anyone to give you the green light. And you don't necessarily, there's so many good things worth investing in, that aren't going to pay out the dividends that you might expect immediately. But in having that kind of a mindset where anything you pick up or anything you look at has something to teach you is going to take you so much farther
Right.
than trying to figure out some game or decode something or decode how to apply to the Ivy Leagues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for the undergrads, there is a formula, and I think there is, because it's just that much harder.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in the world's trying to do it.
Right.
But if you really care and you have a reason, you have a purpose, and that purpose will matter whether you get in or you don't, or wherever you do your program.
Right. Yeah. Well, Julia, thank you so, so much. You're just such an example to me of like embodying what you believe and the things that you're learning. I love watching you like think through things and learn things from your experience and then frame them in such positive ways, and you're a delight to listen to, and I'm so glad that you shared these couple of hours with me, and I think that everything that you shared is going to be really powerful and help the next person, whether it's getting into Harvard or some other master's degree program somewhere or just living their life. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks so much.